want to bring in now foreign affairs commentator Collins Weke, who joins us from Brussels. Collins, it's great to see you. It's been a while. I hope you're keeping well.
I am. Thank you so very much. Always a pleasure to be with you, Amarachi.
Right, and we're talking about the G7 summit that's holding. What a peculiar time it is holding in Canada. You're well aware the US president is attending the summit. He's been accused by the Iranian government of taking some responsibility in the Israeli airstrikes on Iran, but he's confident of a deal between Israel and Iran despite the continuation of those airstrikes. You think he intends to insert himself as mediator in this crisis?
Well, I really don't want to be in the team actually preparing this meeting because, as you know, Amarachi, being a consummate, diplomatic journalist, you would know that a lot of planning goes into all of this, and they plan on, things that are actually, fixed, okay, and then develop the agenda, but. In this specific case, there have been major security, development, quite apart from the three major issues that actually constituted the agenda of this, summit. We are talking of the evolving global power dynamics, and then you have also the security and development, issues, overlapping crises here and there. And then the third issue that was meant to be on the agenda, and still on the agenda, of course, like you mentioned, is trade, investment, and infrastructure. Now, you add to that mix, the 4-day-old, conflict, serious one, between Israel and, Iran. Now, it's being hosted by Canada, and, like you mentioned, the tariff issues are all there. So, I believe that this is a major opportunity to actually begin to hone home all of these issues, because don't forget that the G7 remains very influential because it represents nearly half of the global GDP, even as it navigates internal tension driven by this same US protectionism and trade dispute. So, we are watching things unfold, and in the course of the conversation, I might be able to throw some more light on how things are evolving and perhaps what we might expect.
Yes, so let's just stay a bit more on the Israel-Iran conflict because, of course, that will dominate at least discussions today with all the leaders there. Iran has cancelled talks with the United States this week following the attacks by Israel. Of course, it believes that Israel is acting as a proxy of the United States. How well do you think that leaders will align at the meeting regarding any discussions on Iran? And Israel, of course.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's a revolving door. And indeed, it's a critical question how the leaders are going to align. And that brings me to the point that Alexander was making in the clip that, you played earlier around escalation and expansion. Okay. Now, there is absolutely no doubt that there is an escalation here. Now, an expansion will actually play in when we begin to see some sorts of alignments. Now, let me, focus on, the people that I know, pretty well because this is where I live, this is where I operate. The EU, which is a major power, they are going to always seek the middle ground. EU is not usually driven by emotions and sentiments. They are driven mainly by the continental interest, but that continental interest happens to mostly align with seeking global, alignment, seeking a global peace. And being in the House, I believe that they are going to play a major role in not actually dancing to one particular side. Unlike the United States of America, no matter whatever Israel does, United States will stand behind it. Because at this moment, I think the most vexing question is how America is going to fortify Israel more, supply them, more powerful, bombardment materials to actually penetrate the nuclear sites of, Iran. One will hope that at this moment, the U.S. will keep to its words that it's not going to, get involved further than it has already done by actually, approving of and seconding the bombardment that is actually going on. And so their plan is, beat them to a pulp, beat them to submission. And so when they have been beaten to submission, they will then, sit down on the table and begin to negotiate. Is that going to happen? Not, from my perspective, in terms of listening to the leaders of Iran, who are adamant that they will come to the negotiating table only when the bombs have gone silent.
Yeah, and respectfully so. So this meeting is taking place, of course, with the G7 there, the UK, the US, France, Italy, Japan. There's also one other leader who does stand out in attendance, and that's the South African president. I'm sure people are wondering why Nigeria is not present at the G7 this year.
Well, it's not Nigeria's time yet, but there are signs that Nigeria's time is coming. Now, these are things you don't force. We're talking of diplomacy here. We're talking of, countries actually proving themselves before they are invited, to the table. One major development, for instance, is the fact that South Africa has overtaken Nigeria as the biggest economy in Africa. But we also see from his body language and the shuttle diplomacy that he has undertaken since taking office 2 years ago, that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been actually playing that responsible role, putting Nigeria back on the global agenda as a power to reckon with. I believe that if he continues along that line and actually fortify one of the areas that he's been overlooking, which is the strength that the Nigerian diaspora bring to Nigeria's foreign policy. If he takes advantage of that as an asset and then, continue to do the right things that he's been doing, showing up in the right places and all of that, I believe that it's not going to be, long before Nigeria is invited to the table, just like South Africa.
Well, the US president has always wanted Canada to be the 51st state of the US. They had that rather stiff meeting at the Oval Office when Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney showed up at the White House, where he also emphasized to the US president Canada will not be taking up 51st as this membership state of the US. But now you have Trump coming to his soil. What do you think the optics will be like for both of them?
Well, the first signs of how they are going to get on has already taken place. Let's not forget, Amarachi, that McCartney has already visited the Oval Office. I mean, what didn't play out, in his visit was the sort of scenario we saw between Trump and, Zelensky. And so he is in the game. I mean, McCartney, he's, an international player. He's been doing all of these before. And, he has also shown, the political acumen that he has, because don't forget that, even campaigning to be prime minister, he already talked very tough, made it very clear that Canada is a sovereign nation and nobody, not the, strongest political figure in the world in Donald Trump can actually trample on, Canada. So publicly, he has done that, empowered, the psyche of the Canadians. But now, what he is focused on is bilateral, sitting down in closed doors and beginning to actually negotiate and, telling Trump, well, I mean, you've done your, public diplomacy. I've done mine. This is now the time to, look at what is in need for all of us. Canada has a lot to gain from America and, exactly the other way around as well. And I believe that what both of them will be doing is playing up what they mean to the other country in terms of the values, that they represent. Take steel, for instance. take energy as another instance, and how much both of them could gain by a reasonable tariff regime. And well, it is difficult to predict because Trump has made it clear that he's a tariff kind of guy, and McCartney is completely on the other side of of the divide. So it remains wait and see. But at least the war of wars will cease or has already ceased, and the negotiations through diplomatic channels will take over.
Well, if you could briefly talk about the Trump travel restrictions and how this may be discussed. I'm thinking at the G7 summit, perhaps with some other nations that will be attending, apart from the core G7 members. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you think other countries interpret what the U.S. government has done?
Well, immigration, one way or the other, was already on the agenda. And, Trump and security, of course. Trump positioned his, visa ban for a number of countries. And there is rumor also flying around that additional 36 countries, are included in a memo coming from, the Secretary of State of the United States, Mark Rubio, among which is Nigeria. So it is not a major, it's not going to be a major conversation because it is a problem far from the bed of most of, in fact, all the G7 countries. So they are not affected. But they also have that moral burden to talk about the things that ache, their partner countries. And I believe that, through bilaterals, those that, have the opportunity, I mean, the leaders that have the opportunity to have one-on-one bilateral with Trump, that they are going to raise it as a way of initiating the conversation and, seeking some understanding. But let's also be fair to the United States. Every country has the right to actually protect its borders. And if it is indeed so that the countries included in this visa ban actually harbor quite a lot of risks for the United States, I think it's only reasonable for them to act. But is that entirely the case? Well, not for Nigeria, because we do know that over a decade now, Nigeria has, instituted a biometrics, passport regime, and that is, that gives more credibility to Nigerian, passports. Now, anybody ignoring that is, actually being completely unfair to Nigeria. And I think the same example could be cited for other countries as well. So ultimately, they will get down to the table, discuss it as much as they can, but it is not a major agenda of the G7 summit.
Well, incidentally, the G7 countries that are attending this meeting all have immigration issues. So I'm thinking that they will be rubbing minds with the U.S. president. Collins, thanks again for speaking with us.
Always my pleasure. Thank you, Amarachi, for having me.